You're sitting in your car after work, engine off. The silence feels deafening. You could go home to your empty apartment. You could call someone, anyone. Go to the gym, the mall, anywhere there are people. But the thought of being alone terrifies you more than death itself. You grab your phone immediately. You text someone. You check emails that don't matter. You browse news that makes you anxious. Anything to avoid the one thing that could save your life. Spending time alone with who you really are. Here's a statistic that will shock you. 73% of people would rather give themselves electric shocks than sit alone with their thoughts for 15 minutes. Electric shocks. You read that right. Your fear of being alone is literally destroying your happiness. And tonight, I'm going to prove it to you. But here's what will terrify you even more. You, if you're afraid of being alone, are exactly the person who needs it most. And the people who've learned to enjoy their own company, they're the ones creating the deepest, most authentic relationships with others. This goes against everything our culture teaches you. Everything. You've been told your worth is determined by how many people want to be around you. You've been convinced your happiness comes from a busy social calendar. You've been programmed to believe your peace requires constant noise and activity. The opposite is true. The path to true happiness runs through you, not around you, through you. And until you learn to walk that path alone, you'll never be truly happy with anyone else. I've spent over 40 years studying human consciousness. What I've discovered about solitude will fundamentally change your life. The people with genuine contentment aren't social butterflies. They're people who've mastered the art of being alone. But our culture treats solitude like a disease you need to cure. If you were a child who preferred quiet time, you were labeled antisocial. If you were a teenager who enjoyed your own company, you were called weird. If you're an adult who chooses solitude, you're pitied as a lonely failure. You've been taught to confuse being alone with being broken. You've been conditioned to mistake social dependency for connection. You've been raised in a generation that literally doesn't know how to be with themselves. And it's killing you. Let me tell you about Patricia. You might see yourself in her story. Successful marketing executive. Beautiful. Intelligent. Accomplished. Busy social life. Prestigious job. Everything society told you should make you happy. But Patricia was dying inside. You know what she did? She scheduled every moment to avoid being alone. Breakfast meetings, lunch dates, after-work drinks, weekend activities. She fell asleep watching TV because silence felt unbearable to her. Patricia hadn't spent one evening alone in over 2 years. Not one. The thought of an empty Saturday night sent her into panic attacks. She'd accept invitations to events she hated with people she didn't like, just to avoid facing herself. When I asked what she was afraid of discovering about herself, she couldn't answer. She just knew it felt dangerous. Like something terrible would happen if she stopped running from herself. This is what I call solitude phobia. And it's destroying millions of people's ability to find happiness. Maybe you recognize this in yourself. Here's what Patricia didn't understand, and maybe you don't understand this either. You cannot love others authentically until you learn to enjoy your own company. You cannot create healthy relationships when you're using people to avoid yourself. When you're afraid of being alone, you're not connecting out of love. You're connecting out of fear, desperation, need. You're not sharing your authentic self because you don't know who that is. You're presenting a fake version designed to keep others around so you don't have to face the silence. This creates what I call hungry relationships. You're constantly feeding off other people's energy to avoid the emptiness you feel inside. But here's the cruel irony. The emptiness you're avoiding is exactly what you need to explore to find the fullness you're seeking. Think about the most magnetic people you know, the ones who light up every room they enter, the ones who make you feel special just by being present. These aren't people desperate for company. These aren't people filling every moment with chatter. These are people who've learned to be complete within themselves. They bring wholeness to every interaction instead of holes that need to be filled. They share abundance instead of seeking to fill lack. They connect from fullness instead of neediness. And this makes them incredibly attractive to you and everyone else. As I've often said, you cannot be lonely if you like the person you're alone with. But you've probably never learned to like yourself. You've spent so much time being who others want you to be that you've lost touch with who you actually are. Here's what happened when Patricia finally took my challenge. And I'm going to challenge you with the same thing. Spend one full day alone. No phone calls, no TV, no books, no music, no internet, just you and your thoughts for 24 hours. Patricia's first few hours were torture. She felt like climbing the walls. Her mind raced with anxiety. She felt physical urges to call someone, anyone, to rescue her from herself. But she stayed with it. And you can too. Around hour 6, something shifted for Patricia. The mental chatter quieted down. For the first time in years, she could hear her own inner voice underneath all the noise. She started noticing things about herself she'd forgotten. Her love of plants, how light moved across her walls throughout the day, thoughts and ideas unconnected to work or social obligations. By the end of that day, Patricia discovered something profound. She actually enjoyed her own company. She was interesting to herself. She had thoughts worth thinking and dreams worth exploring. The woman she'd been running from for years turned out to be someone she genuinely liked. But here's what made this transformation even more remarkable. As Patricia learned to enjoy being alone, her relationships with others dramatically improved. You see, she stopped accepting invitations out of desperation. She started choosing ones that genuinely interested her. She stopped talking just to fill silence. She started speaking when she had something meaningful to say. Her friendships became deeper because she brought authenticity instead of neediness. Her romantic relationships became healthier because she chose partners out of attraction rather than fear of being alone. This is the paradox that will blow your mind. Learning to be happy alone doesn't make you antisocial. It makes you selectively social. It doesn't reduce your capacity for love. It increases it. It doesn't isolate you from others. It allows you to connect from choice rather than desperation. But here's what nobody tells you. There's a difference between being alone and being in solitude. Being alone can mean the absence of other people. Solitude is the presence of yourself. You probably do this. When you're physically alone, you immediately fill the space with distractions. TV, phone calls, internet, music, books, anything to avoid the direct experience of your own consciousness. This isn't solitude. This is you being alone while remaining disconnected from yourself. True solitude requires what I call loving attention to yourself. You sit with whatever arises without trying to fix it, change it, or distract yourself from it. You become curious about your own inner landscape instead of constantly seeking entertainment from external sources. And let me share what this looked like for Michael. You might relate to his story too. Successful architect. Every Sunday night, he'd feel deep sadness he couldn't explain or shake. He'd try movies, social media, calling friends, but the feeling persisted. When Michael learned to practice true solitude, he discovered his Sunday sadness wasn't something to avoid. It was information, his inner wisdom, trying to tell him his life wasn't aligned with his deepest values. In the silence, Michael realized he'd been living his father's dream of architectural success rather than his own dream of teaching young people. The sadness wasn't depression. It was his authentic self, mourning the life he wasn't living. This discovery only came through solitude. In the noise of constant social interaction, Michael couldn't hear his own voice. But in the clarity of solitude, it became unmistakable. Within a year, Michael transitioned from private practice to teaching architecture. The Sunday blues disappeared because his life was finally aligned with who he actually was, rather than who he thought he should be. This is what solitude offers that social connection cannot give you. Direct access to your own truth. When you're always with others, you're always responding to their energy, their needs, their expectations. But in solitude, you meet yourself without the filter of other people's perceptions. You discover desires you didn't know you had, strengths you didn't know you possessed, dreams you'd forgotten you were carrying. You remember who you were before the world told you who you should be. This doesn't mean relationships are unimportant to you. It means your relationship with yourself becomes the foundation for all your other relationships. When you're comfortable in your own skin, you bring that comfort to every interaction you have. People can sense the difference between someone who needs them and someone who chooses them. They can feel the difference between someone who's avoiding themselves and someone who's genuinely interested in others. The energy you bring to your relationships is determined by the relationship you have with yourself. Here's a practice that will transform your life if you commit to it. You start with 15 minutes daily of true solitude. No phone, no music, no reading, no distractions of any kind. You just sit comfortably and pay attention to whatever arises in your consciousness. You don't try to meditate, you don't judge what comes up. You simply practice being present with yourself without needing entertainment or rescue from external stimulation. The first few times you do this, it will feel uncomfortable, boring. Your mind will generate reasons why you should stop and do something productive. This resistance is normal. It's your ego protecting you from discovering you don't need constant validation to feel okay. But if you persist, something beautiful happens. You'll start noticing the richness of your own inner world. You'll discover your thoughts are actually interesting when you're not rushing to escape from them. you'll find silence isn't empty. It's full of possibility and peace. As you become comfortable with short periods, you extend them. You try an entire evening alone without distractions. Then perhaps a full day. Eventually you might even take a solo vacation, where your only agenda is spending time with yourself. Each experience will teach you something new about who you are when you're not performing for others. You'll discover aspects of your personality that only emerge in solitude. You'll find creative ideas that surface only in the quiet space of your mind. But most importantly, you'll develop what I call emotional self-sufficiency. This doesn't mean you don't need others. It means you're not emotionally dependent on them for your sense of worth and well-being. When you're emotionally self-sufficient, you love others freely because you're not desperately needing them to fill holes in your psyche. You enjoy their company without clinging to them. You can be present for their joy and pain without making it about your own needs. This creates truly intimate relationships for you, not the false intimacy of mutual dependency, but authentic intimacy of two whole people choosing to share their lives, not desperate connection of two people trying to complete each other, but joyful connection of two people already complete within themselves. As I've said many times, what you think of me is none of my business. This becomes possible for you only when you've learned to validate yourself through solitude rather than constantly seeking validation from others. When you know who you are because you spend time getting to know yourself, other people's opinions become interesting feedback rather than sources of anxiety for you. The world will always try to convince you that happiness comes from external sources. Buy this product, find the right person, join the right group, live in the right place, achieve the right goals. Then you'll be happy. But every person who has found lasting happiness will tell you the same thing. It came from within. And the only way for you to access what's within is through solitude. The only way for you to hear your own voice is to create silence. The only way for you to know your own mind is to spend time alone with it. This doesn't happen overnight for you. Learning to enjoy your own company requires practice and patience. You've probably spent years training yourself to avoid solitude. It will take time for you to retrain yourself to embrace it. But here's what will motivate you to persist. Every moment you spend in genuine solitude makes you more interesting, attractive, magnetic to others. When you're not desperate for connection, people are naturally drawn to your self-possession. When you're not afraid of being alone, others feel safe being vulnerable with you because they sense you won't cling to them or make them responsible for your emotional well-being. The most beloved, respected, sought-after people are invariably those who could be perfectly happy alone. They choose relationships from abundance rather than need, from joy rather than fear, from genuine interest rather than desperate hunger for validation. Your capacity for solitude is directly proportional to your capacity for genuine intimacy. The more comfortable you are with yourself, the more comfortable others will be with you. But beyond improving your relationships with others, learning to be alone gives you something more valuable: an unshakable relationship with yourself. You develop an inner compass that can guide you through any external storm. You cultivate an inner sanctuary where you can always find peace. In a culture that profits from your insecurity and your desperate need for external validation, choosing to find happiness within yourself is an act of rebellion. It's you declaring that you refuse to make your peace conditional on circumstances you cannot control. When you learn to be truly happy alone, you become unconquerable. Not because you don't care about others or because you've isolated yourself, but because your happiness has a foundation that cannot be shaken by external events. You carry your own weather wherever you go. This is ultimate freedom for you. To be so comfortable in your own skin, so genuinely interested in your own thoughts and dreams, so at peace with your own company, that you never again settle for relationships that diminish you or activities that drain you just to avoid being alone. The path to this freedom begins with a single step. Your willingness to spend time alone with yourself without needing to be rescued, entertained, or validated by anything or anyone else. It begins with your radical act of paying loving attention to your own inner world. As I've always taught, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And when you change the way you look at solitude, from something to fear to something to embrace, your entire relationship with yourself and others transforms. Tonight when you go home, I want you to try something different. Instead of immediately reaching for your phone, or turning on TV, or calling a friend, you sit quietly for a few minutes. You notice what it feels like to be alone with yourself. You notice any anxiety or resistance that arises. You don't let it drive you back into distraction. This is where your journey to true happiness begins. Not in finding the right person or joining the right group or achieving the right goals, but in you falling in love with the most important person you'll ever know, yourself. The world is full of people running from themselves, desperately seeking in others what they can only find within. You don't have to be one of them. You can choose instead to be someone who has looked into their own soul and found it beautiful. Someone who has spent time in their own company and found it delightful. Someone who has learned that the deepest happiness comes not from being loved by others, but from you truly loving yourself. This is not selfishness. This is the foundation of all genuine love. How can you give to others what you have never given to yourself? How can you offer authentic presence when you have never been willing to be present with yourself? Your willingness to embrace solitude is your gift to every person whose life you touch. It's your contribution to a world that desperately needs more people who are whole, centered, and genuinely happy. As I've said, you have everything within you that Buddha had, that Christ had, that every great teacher who ever walked the planet had. You just need the courage to spend time alone and discover it. The choice is yours. You can continue running from yourself, or you can finally come home to who you really are. You can keep seeking happiness in all the wrong places, or you can find it in the only place it has ever existed, within you. Your journey to true happiness is waiting for you. It's as close as your next moment alone with yourself. The question is, are you brave enough to take it?